way we did the hard copy of the package is that I had emailed that all to you, but then when I posted it on the website, I only posted part of it. So I just want to make sure everybody got the entire packet for the concept review of it's a Wardell project, but it's the HA investments. But it's under. Okay. But anyway, go ahead, we're ready. All right, thank you.
Looks like on the digital technology, we've got Tony, Dave, Jason. So thank you for joining. We're kicking off our work session. In the room, we've got Justin, Jay. Well, you can probably see everybody here. Jake, Ray, the mayor, Wes, and Aaron. So thank you all for joining. Teresa's keeping us situated. Our agenda for tonight, once we start our public session, we have our 3 items. So just to make sure that we're aware of those, hopefully everyone's had a chance to do some review ahead of time. We will be doing a public hearing for the Rhinell Business Park. So this is something that's come before us a number of times in different capacities. So we'll look through that piece. Before we jump into any conversation on this, I didn't know, Jake, if you had anything specific to add. No. All right. Good enough. The other 2 are the H&A investments, which is the packet that we have in front of us for the apartment complex. And then continuing our conversation on mixed residential housing, the overlay zone that we touched on in detail last month. We'll continue that work this month as well. Seems a little louder than normal, doesn't it? Maybe I was, all right. And then Jake, from a general plan standpoint, where were you wanting to go through tonight?
Wanted to talk about the recreation, parks, trails and recreation chapter, and I did not send that out, and I apologize, and we can hit this again next month as well if people need more reading time. We are at a nice point where I'm going to pull up the screen here. We're ready. I think we're within just a couple months of putting all our comments together, send it back to the consultant, have them prepare a new version. And then hopefully that's in a condition that we can do a public open house, because I think we have one more open house with them, and then a public hearing and review it and take it on. So Parks and Rec chapter, any final things, open house, and then it goes on.
Okay.
But I mean,
Well, were you intending to spend some time tonight then, or did you want to postpone that until our next?
I think spend some time on it, because enough of this, I think Parks and Rec is something that everyone seems to understand just from living here and experience and all of that. There's plenty from our previous conversations. There's plenty of things that, your trails and your parks that you'll have comments that we can discuss.
That sounds good. Before we jump into that, though, I want to make sure that we feel comfortable with the items on our agenda for tonight. And so, most of our time we can spend with the Parks and Rec, but I do want to spend a few minutes going through these 3 items so that we're not coming in completely cold in the general session. With
one reminder on the HA, that is the reason we're reviewing it is because it's in sensitive lands. So the Planning Commission, if they feel it's appropriate, would make a recommendation, and the application will move on to the City Council.
Thank you. And I think that's a key component of what we're going to be doing. And Teresa reminded me of that as well, that particular agenda item is not a granting approval. It is making a recommendation to the city council. So that's for item number 2, the H&A Investments apartment complex. With respect to the Rhinell Business Park, let me pull that up. Could you pull that up, Teresa, or?
Yeah, I don't have that one, so if Teresa can, that'd be good.
What is happening? Oh.
Since I know a little bit more about this, what it is that the Rhinell Business Park is a subdivision. And they've got a parcel that's to the east that they would like to include in a lot in that subdivision. State legislature indicates that anytime the outside boundary of a subdivision changes, it must go through an amended subdivision application that requires a public hearing. So that's what they're doing. Let me get that up, and why can't I? What am I looking for? Hold on. And originally this lot ended right here. I'm not sharing my screen. Hold on. And this parcel here, they'd like to include it into this lot. And so it's going to change the outside boundary of the Rhinell Business Park plat.
Isn't there, at the end of that cul-de-sac, already a building in that first part of the, whereas frontage on the cul-de-sac?
So right here is a Fairway Glass.
Yeah,
This is empty. This is Precision Auto.
okay.
And then on this west side is Centerpoint Construction. This is the last
We're
lot,
talking about the empty one.
empty lot to include this portion in the subdivision.
What was that part of before?
It was an empty field. Here's Ridley's grocery stores right here.
Yeah, okay.
Extends past, I mean, to the edge of Ridley's, right? That property line is all the way to the edge of.
It's the edge of their driveway. Like they had to buy, they bought another 10 feet in order to get to the driveway.
So remind me again why we need a public hearing just to include something else into the subdivision. It's not changing the zoning or the,
Yeah, so the second parcel that's going to be added is in the manufacturing, so it's not changing, but due to the, there is other businesses and people around that anytime a subdivision is amended to include more property, has to be a public
is
hearing.
that true for any subdivision? Let's say it weren't an industrial subdivision, but it's a residential one. Same idea.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, any thoughts before, that you want to discuss on this in our working session, or you feel comfortable moving into our general session with that background?
So with the public hearing, I mean, we open it up and we hear, but are we actually voting on anything?
This would just be a recommendation to the city council,
To approve
the amended subdivision or amended plat.
to amend the plat?
Mhm.
Teresa, is it the same owner that owns all of that property?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Hey, Teresa, we're just adding the piece of property. We're not talking about how it's going to be used at this point.
Correct. This is just adding.
Okay.
Jason, go ahead.
Is this anything that staff reviewed and any recommendation or notes from staff?
I didn't
I didn't see
see,
any.
I didn't see notes on this one.
I
Um,
don't think Jake had anything to say, really. It's pretty straightforward. It's just more of a technicality than anything.
Well, that's, I guess, the question. It's already zoned this way. So whether it's included in the subdivision or not, it doesn't change the land use,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
It's, they could still do on it same things. It just combines the plat.
Yeah.
essentially.
What was the date on the original plat?
Sure.
Okay, we can look at that when we get there. But no, I don't have any experience or knowledge of this project.
So there's really nothing, this is a technicality. We don't need to really debate this.
Right.
Okay,
Open, close.
got it.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this one? H and A then, let's same idea here in the sense that we're providing a recommendation to the city council. We have the packet that Teresa printed out for us in full color, no less. And let's just make sure we're all square on this one before we.
And I did do a report on this one and gone through
There's
it.
a report on this with several things we ought to discuss.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to start us off, right?
And if you want,
I'd like.
yeah,
that.
I appreciate the staff report. And Jake, you know that. There's some things we ought to consider unless things have been updated. That's the difficulty of this. Sometimes when a developer's given this information, sometimes they have it already updated before we get to this meeting. So part of the question is, are some of these things already updated, or do we still need to ask them to update them? As I looked at this, the thing that my first, that was on number 4. Those are some recommendations that Jake, I thought we ought to include in the motion, if we should make a motion to pass it on. On that 4A, you can read there, it talks about sensitive land district, make sure that's applicable. And then 4B also talks about engineering requirements to be met. And then 4C talk about archaeological plans, architectural, excuse me, I can't pronounce the word, plans. When I first read it, I thought, well, that's doesn't need to be done. But I read later on, that's a requirement for the sensitive land issues. So that needs to be part of it. I don't know if they have that done yet or not. So these are things I think probably ought to include in the motion to have them do before they go to city council. And that's C, D is a similar kind of thing. Landscaping plans, or any of those included either. As you go to 5, 5 talks about the sensitive land overlay conditions. I don't know if they weren't listed anywhere, so I don't know if they've been met or not. We need to ask if they've been done or not. Jake, thoughts on that?
Applicable ones are in the doc. I kind of pulled them out.
Chart below,
Yeah, and also in the engineering plans,
inward,
in the engineering letter.
okay, right, that's the below. In the Jones report. Which down further, there's some things there that I'm not sure have been done yet or not. The one question I have, I'm not sure on, is the city owned right of way. I'm not sure what we decided for the city to do with that right of way. We're gonna maintain ownership, we're gonna lease it to them. If we're going to sell it, there's already talks about leasing here. But to this point, it talks about there'll be a lease agreement if we're gonna lease it. I haven't seen that document yet.
Ray, I could comment on that. The council has discussed that and has, per Gary's advice, the way we're going to approach that is to own the property and then sign an agreement and lease it back. I think the engineering comments in here made reference to that,
Right.
yeah, that it was, that was going to be the case, but recommended that, it would be a private road with all of the typical conditions of a, private application.
Well, that's been the discussion. I appreciate that's been the discussion, but I don't know if that's been done yet or not. So
Yeah, I
part of-
don't know whether an agreement's been drawn up yet or not, so
Part of
that,
what this group does, what Tony and I fought for the last 75,000 years. Does this body pass on something with several things left to be undone? Or do we say we'll table it till these things are completed? And that's part of the question. There are several things here that are not done yet. That's
This-
one of them.
Yeah, and Ray, this is a concept, still has preliminary and final. The
Okay.
negotiations in the city council was a recommendation of what they would do as it proceeded. They couldn't grant or do any kind of agreement with them until an application had been submitted. But we couldn't submit the application without something from the city council saying that they are willing to move on in the road. There are items that need to be done at the concept, but don't need to be completed till preliminary and final. Speaking with Matt, who's been working with the Wardell brothers for probably 8 months now? Or 9 months, we've gotten to the point where the planning commission, planning staff and engineer have felt comfortable. It's enough to be able to move on to a review on concept, but not to preliminary and final.
Okay.
And
I-
with concept, that doesn't need to go to the city council.
As in the
does
sensitive
because
land,
it's
it's
sensitive
required on
lands,
all
okay.
3 steps. So that's
Concept goes to city council as well.
concept, preliminary and final. So this
Because
would
it's
go.
sensitive.
Mhm.
Oh, since, okay, that's figure that, okay. So I guess still the question, do we pass the concept, just noting several things still need to be accomplished before final, which is okay with me. I just want to bring that up so everybody's aware of that. There's still some pieces that they're working on. And my opinion of Wardell Brothers, they are diligent in trying to do what they're asked to do. They are. They're not trying to get away with something. There's just some pieces that aren't accomplished yet. I'm okay if we give concept approval. We just mentioned there's still things that still need to be accomplished and ask them to accomplish those before they come back for final.
Is there anything else that triggers sensitive lands? In this case, it's the topography and slope. It's the slope. Is there anything else that would trigger that, or is it just slope,
Floodplain,
floodplain? But that's not a factor.
On this
here.
one,
no.
So just the topography is the only thing that or the slope, okay.
So I don't necessarily think you want me to go through all the other pieces. There are just some pieces that are still in process to be done. Like I say, I trust our system, I trust our staff, and working with Wardell's that they'll be accomplished before final. I think we need to make a mention of something like that. So if you want me to go through all of them, or if you want to just
I
hold
don't know
on,
that
hold
we
on
need to
that,
go
not worry
through.
about all of them.
I don't know that we need to go through them right now, unless
and
you'd
that's
like
fine.
to. I mean, that's up to you, but
No, I'm fine whichever way you want, Nate.
okay, I think we can go through the line by line in the general session, make sure that those are outlined. Is there any liability? To the city, if we approve this thing and then, there's a, what do you call it, landslide, and the thing falls down, like, does that fall on the city? Is there anything that the engineering precautions that are in place, they accept the risk that's,
In addition, the engineering, there's also talks about I can't pronounce the big words, geological report would need to be done also, and sensitive lands have to do a geological report. And that's supposedly where the heavy issue lies, is on that report rather than on the city.
okay.
The geological firm that stamps it. Yes, this ground is good, or no, this ground is not.
There is, I know Morgan County has purchased some homes in Mountain Green because of unstable slopes. So yeah, there is liability on the city. Where and exactly how that lands, I don't know.
I guess that's
But-
part of my question is, you know, is that this body's responsibility to do the I mean, I'm not an engineering expert. I just assume the city engineers have what they need.
Yeah, especially on the, Matt will review that, engineering will review it, and then also the building officials will review it. That's kind of the two professionals that will look closely at that.
So if we trust.
Jake, I didn't see a requirement for a geological study or review. Did I just miss that from the engineer?
I don't know. I'll have to look myself to see if I haven't seen a geotechnical report for
No
this
one yet.
property,
No one yet.
but that is a typical, before we have this item, I can do a quick review of our code and take a look. And it would be acceptable for the planning commission to require a geotechnical report before approval by city council. That is something that you could choose to mitigate, to minimize the impacts of development on it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about slopes, and in fact, even what's being presented tonight, I guess, is a revision from earlier construction that included even steeper grades. So probably a consideration.
Item 6 been done.
Yeah, item 6 shows that a geotechnical report was complete with no significant issues. In a previous conversation with the engineer about these particular reports, and part of the accountability and a majority of it is the technician or engineer that does a geotech report. That's part of his certification to have some liability on his review, so.
Oh, is it, is this geotechnical engineer? It's not part of Jones. It's just it's a third party.
Correct.
Yeah, and they would do that for the
It's done.
developer.
So
Yeah, it's
Jake,
the developer's responsibility to pay for that.
tell me this,
So Jake, I heard. so
how much
Jake-
changed from the first time that they submitted this? Because I've known these projects that it's just kind of turns into a battle of attrition of the contractor just keeps submitting it and submitting it and submitting it and get it, somebody to make it more technical sounding. And it's basically the same thing as they submitted the first time. And then what Nate says down the road 15 years and it's sliding off the mountain. And then they go to the city and go, well, you guys are the ones that approved this project. So what has changed in what they submitted first to what they
So
submit now?
they did have buildings on slopes, which according to our city engineer were greater than 30%, and that area is no longer shown as development. So the number of units has been reduced by about a third.
Oh, okay.
And-
22 to 22.
And,
Oh,
and,
okay.
yeah, and there's been significant change, and some of the site plan. They weren't, my review in November showed them not meeting setbacks, no architecture. We gave them a long list of what they were missing, and they came back being able to check off most of it.
Oh, okay.
We wouldn't be here today. Well, we wouldn't be discussing the project today if they hadn't completed an application. That
Okay.
was,
So I have the same question Ray was kind of going, or I think you were going this direction. You know, as far as sending in, you know, a recommendation to the city council on this, at the concept approval stage, there's not gonna be all these things necessarily worked out. And is that okay? Because, you know, typically we might, you know, if this weren't in sensitive lands, it would just be internal to the planning commission. We could approve it before we send anything to the city council. We'd see it again for, you know, a preliminary and final and be able to resolve those. In this case, it'll be going to the city council and, you know, there's all these open items that, you know, and is that okay?
there is no plat on this project. They're all for rent apartments. And so there's no division of property.
Nate,
So in that case, you wouldn't have seen this project because If it were not in the city count, if we're not in the sensitive lands, then it wouldn't have required a review.
Or required anything.
Well, staff review, but not,
There's no plat.
right.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
it's always been my emphasis, and Ray alluded to this a few minutes ago, that I don't know if it's been 75,000 years that we've been working on this, but it's been several. But my emphasis has always been that it comes to the city council clean on final approval. You know, it's difficult as a city council to have something passed on to us for recommendation for final approval if there's still a lot of loose ends out there. So from my perspective, it's always been, let's have it clean when it comes to us for final approval.
Go ahead, Ray.
We talk in a piece. There are but 3 reports here. The August 4th one basically is fully completed. It's in good shape. That shows that the Wardell brothers are working on solving the things that are brought up. The one on August 4th is completed. The one I'm looking at on August 28th, I've got 4 or 5 that are not quite completed yet. And then the last one was the November 30th report, and those still need to be done. So I think it's in process. Since this is sensitive land, that's the reason it's already been discussed. That's what's going to city council. Normally we would just say, yeah, concept looks good, bring back to us for the next step. Concept quite often doesn't have to have everything done, or they would request concept and file at the same time. So there is still some basic things not accomplished. We just need to list and say, before final, work with the engineer and get these things accomplished. Understanding concept is, yes, we know where it's at. We think these apartments will fit here. Yes, we know it's sensitive lands. We appreciate the fact that you're not building on the steeper slopes. You changed your plan now to where you've only got 22 to 32. You're not on the steep slopes. You changed those pieces. To me, that shows some progress and some willingness on both parts. And so we're saying now as a concept, do we think it's okay to put them there? Do they fit the zoning? Do they fit the other requirements? Or they made progress towards a positive report? That's what, to me, what concept says.
Yeah.
Now, final, they need to have all these miscellaneous things completed.
And we'll still have that opportunity when it comes through.
It'll come back final.
Well, Tony, you've done a good job over the years instilling that principle of have it clean on final. And I think we can still honor that principle. And on this one, it may not be clean on concept, but you're only seeing it because, you know, it's coming through the sensitive lands ordinance.
Right, and I think speaking for me and my colleagues on the city council, it's the final approval that's important to us. Problem is we give it final approval. If it was recommended to us from the planning commission and we give it final approval, then we really had no way of checking up on whether or not some of those unchecked items ever got done or not. So yeah, I appreciate your effort in doing that as a planning commission. Appreciate it a lot.
So that being said, you know, what we can talk to the specific line items in the general session, but are there any other concerns from, you know, just that we want to work through right now ahead of that?
So in the general session, then, we're gonna have a motion to approve the
Make a
concept.
recommendation.
To make the
to
recommendation
city
to
council.
approve, you know, yeah, the motion would be the recommendation to approve the concept. And we do need to line out every one of the things that they have not done yet or do not.
We don't have to line them all out. Can if you want, or we can really say there are several items listed on the engineering report that show in progress or incomplete. Understand they would need to be accomplished.
Just make it clear that those need to be
Make it clear
done.
there are items there, they're not completed. They
Okay,
need to be completed. I would also give them praise for the progress, seeming progress they've made.
So we do not need to go in and point out all these. They
Don't need to
should be
specify.
aware that those things are not
Don't need
done.
to specify every one of them
And
in the
say,
motion.
just keep going with that progress and you won't get the final approval unless those are done.
Until everything's done. So it's a clean engineering report.
Teresa, are they likely to ask for preliminary and final at the same time?
They could do.
I'm not sure on this one due to sensitive lands, if they're gonna do separate, just because it's very
There's a lot of detail.
intense project and pretty detailed on what they can and can't do, so.
Yeah, and that could be up to the planning commission. I think based off the information we have, you could recommend preliminary approval
Is-
and recommend that council also do the same. And that way require them to button everything up. And also there are some certain things that you can make recommendations on that may need to make some minor tweaks. So it could be in the applicant's behalf to go through it one more time as well.
The one thing, question I'm interested in, maybe Tracy knows, the piece or the proposed road into the development, the piece to the west, what's it proposed to do? Anything at this point? Okay, the piece to the east is where the buildings are proposed to be. They also own the ground piece to the west.
Did you want to go for that?
Yeah, so, well, that's in question. So the applicant's engineer says that it's less than 30% slope. Jones has measured it and says it's greater than 30%.
Piece to the west.
Piece to the west. I've looked at it on the best tools that I have and I see it does, I mean, it's close to 30, but it looks greater than 30. So they're not proposing it development on that because we're saying you can't build on it. However, once they get in there and start moving ground and development happens and all of that, they can make it less and you go back and survey in a couple of years and it's less. So
20 years and it will miraculously be ready to build on.
But you could mark it as like at request that it be conserved or, come up with something like that. You know what I'm saying is that could be part of it. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I've discussed this with Jordash a time or two. And what I understand is the landscaping behind the upper unit is why that's landscaping, because of the greater than 30%, I believe. But the piece of ground to the west has one hump in it that's over 30% or close to it, but it was also man-made. It wasn't Mother Nature that made that. So I don't know if that makes a difference as far as touching it or.
Yeah, and that's very difficult to show history of why it's man-made or is it, I mean, verifying that.
Report to verify the base of it too.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, if they took out that hump,
Then it's buildable.
then it's buildable.
Nate, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So Jake, you mentioned on your item 4C that with a long rectangular building, the roof line should vary and change to show variety in architecture. Is that comment, have these plans been changed to show that, or or these plans you're recommending that maybe it show that? And then I guess, Nate, is there any discussion on, does that need to change?
Good question.
So that's my design recommendation to make them more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And because the ordinance allows for that. It's more of a suggestion to the planning commission to consider than you really need to kind of thing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the buildings are pretty blah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's,
Can we legally require
oh,
that?
absolutely.
At this point, it wouldn't be
You-
adding
you-
additional.
Yeah, it is at your discretion because of the ordinance.
So now may be a good time to talk about it.
Tell them that it's law. Yeah. I mean, this,
So
right here, this looks like one big, this could be a a motel from the seventies.
It looks like when you drive through Rollins and stop at one of those $19 hotel rooms.
Wyoming from the seventies.
And Jake, I have a question on that. Is the picture you're seeing on the front, that is the front of the units, which will be facing each other on the parking lot.
Not the back.
So the back of it is what you're gonna see from 700.
That's, I think, even more plain, right?
Is there an elevation of the back?
Yes.
So can I make one more comment?
Please do.
On the front picture, those, over the doors and those little variations in the roof, they were actually added to make it more attractive, but the upper units, they enter the landscaping on the back from the second floor. It's not, so the basement's totally into the hill without a way to get out of the basement.
Oh,
to the
yeah,
back.
there's stairs going up. So you almost need an elevation of that one as well. Because they're two different building types. A good point.
And then my one other concern is I don't see any much visitor parking.
They meet the code requirements.
Where do they show that?
Originally, well, they show in terms that they have the numbers.
That's three per apartment.
Yeah. Yeah, and they didn't on the, back to what was his question from before, what if they changed? The previous submittal did not meet visitor parkings, but this one does. Per ordinance.
I guess I just don't have trained eyes to see where it's at, right?
We can show you.
Well, so I am seeing that a rear elevation towards the end of this packet. Doesn't look much better.
Yeah, we only have 20 minutes. Could we jump in the general plan for a little bit?
Yeah, let's wrap this up.
Quick questions, I hope. So number one, do we need to mention anything about sensitive lands when we make the motion? They just understand that's required, or they have to address it as such?
You can, and you probably should mention it, yeah, just a motion.
I guess I mentioned that the reason why we're passing this on to city council.
Yeah.
is because it's.
Okay.
When I introduce the topic, I'll also
Okay.
reference that as well.
The second question, this is for my own information. The designation of sensitive lands, who designates it? The engineer?
The city has, it's
Is
in,
it already an overlay?
yeah, it's
on
it's an official city map.
Okay,
So it's per map.
is it in here already? Like in the overlays that we have on the interactive map?
No, it's in a different city map. We've
Okay, I
talked
mean,
to Jones about.
That's
getting-
fine. I just was curious on how that's
Developer would have
designated.
known that going into it.
Yeah, they already,
Any final thoughts? We can spend the last 18 minutes on the general plan. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Kate.
okay, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna do, I want to really actually jump right into the heart of this. So after we finish some homework, for the planning commission before next month is to read the whole chapter on parks, trails, parks, open space, recreation and trails. But goal 10 here of the draft general plan, provide a comprehensive connected network of parks, open space, recreation and trails. It's a very general goal, but it is a good one. Assure the residents of Morgan City have equitable access to a diverse system of high-quality parks, recreation, and trail facilities. Strive for a future park level of service of 3.14 acres per 1,000 population. So Morgan City, you're about 4,500. Is that right, Mayor? On your population. And so that would mean 4.5 acres a park. That's not very much. That's one city park, which is, you have one city park that's developed and then you have the other land and maybe more. I don't know all of the city property, but I wanted to bring this to your attention. And, oh, there you, so this says 4,200. In my opinion, it's too low. And I'm going to show you what I found today. Yes, so you could tell me your experience with teams and sports and kids and parks. There's active parks, you know, pickleball, tennis, soccer, lacrosse, football, all of those are active parks. And then there's passive parks, a pond, a trail through a grove, a meadow. Those are very valuable too. Wildlife, just a place you want to go see some nature and get some peace and hang out. And then of course there's trails and you want to connect those. So on the screen here, I did a little search and this is for Murray City. You'll see here at these numbers. And this is stuff I was seeing in Salt Lake County in terms of, and that's why I was just thinking, man, these numbers are low. Salt Lake City is 4.3, so that's a 25% increase. West Valley is less at 2.8. Woods Cross at 6, West Jordan 6, Sandy at 6.5, Taylorsville 6.5, Murray at 6.9, South Ogden is 8, which is really high and well. Logan City at 10. And this really is the best way to measure parks because as your city grows, you want your parks to grow. Now, of course, land's not being created, but revenue sources, looking for land, that kind of thing. So if you're familiar with some of these cities in the Wasatch Front, Morgan City is about half or less of a lot of different cities. And I think I had one more. Nationally, a lot of cities are actually closer to 10 in terms of parks. But in Utah, we have so much public lands with the national forest and BLM and all of that. And so in some ways, that's part of why we don't have as much parks. If you've been to other cities, they just have these amazing parks like all over. And we just don't have that as much in Utah. Not to say that we don't completely. So with that being said, what are your thoughts on, okay, here's American Fork, 6.2. And on the west side of Salt Lake County, we did a study and it came in at about 5+ for the kind of the whole bench of the Salt Lake County on the west side. So back to these numbers, are you okay with your current level of service, meaning there's enough fields or you have enough variety of parks or whatever? Or do you think, yeah, we actually need more for our current demand, which means we need to up our goal for future. So as we increase population, we're always striving to that, whatever that parks per 1,000. 3.14 is what's in the general plan. And that's what you're at now. And so I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the draft says this is our level of service now, 3.14 acres per 1,000 residents. Well, let's just keep that and keep going if you're happy with where you're at.
It's pie, right? I mean, someone just said that looks good. Okay, so two things. And I have to say, the county partnership here would be very important because we are restricted on land. There is a huge fairgrounds renovation plan that expands soccer fields, playing other fields that would connect with the bridge to the walkway coming across past the schools and the recplex that would feed into that, which would be amazing. I think that plays very well because it's so close. The second thing is on the trails. There's a county trails committee, the ATAB board, and they are putting together, they've hired consultants and they've got a trails plan and mapped. Have you already know all this?
No.
Okay, so they've got a lot of this stuff. There's plans for connecting Mountain Green and Morgan. There's plans to connect on, and continue the trail down the river. And so a lot of those would play very well with this plan. And I think I can help get you a copy of what that's looking like. So
That'd be great.
yeah, I mean, it's really like, it's pretty extensive if you ever get it. It's gonna take a while. Plus the governor put some more money towards cities and counties and other places to improve active transportation, including trails and stuff, which
Lot of
which we want to
grants.
get that.
A lot of grant
So-
money out there for trails.
So I think the coordination with the county when it comes to some of this, I know that's not the only thing we can do, but it is a big part. And quite honestly, residents really don't know where the county and city lines meet.
The integration.
You can
It's a
tell you
good
don't care.
Yeah, they're not gonna care, but to your point, we do need more. There's not enough space.
I recommend kind of where you're going to, that maintaining the status quo of 3.14 is probably not appropriate. Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Part of the piece to this is the kind of park you're talking about. Because we currently have some parks in the city that are used hardly at all, if ever. So part of what we need, yeah, like 5 Point, like one up on the hill up there, but Mahogany Ridge. They got parks and trails up there. I think about that, not use it. So you gotta define the kind of park you want, the kind of recreation area you want.
Well,
There's some parks in the city that are not even used. So if we increase that type, to me, that doesn't make sense.
and I
And
think
people
part of
don't
it-
know about it too. Like, people don't even think that that's
Yeah, they don't
part
think
of
that's
what
a
they can
park.
use. So
We have those kind of parks, nobody uses it, or at
Well,
least
they-
very
they
seldom.
might
people
think it's a
use those
neighborhood
on-
park, but
Yeah.
here's where I think there's some challenges, it references the youth, youth leagues and things like that. And that, during the prime time of using the parks, I live in Fox Point, and so it gets used more than you might think, but it's used for football practice and baseball practice and soccer practice. And so
for those type purposes.
and so people don't just go over there to hang out. Because there's usually that stuff going on in the, most of the afternoons. So I don't know how to preserve some of the parks that there's space that's just publicly available, and others that's reservable for these types of youth leagues.
I've associated for years and years in fairgrounds, except for football practice and the horse events. The rest of fairgrounds gets used hardly at all during the full rest of the year, except for, fair time. So there's a lot of green grass up there that nobody uses except for
Yeah.
the football practice.
One thing to keep in mind, land that is not city owned, you don't have any control over. Maybe a church that's allowing people to use it, or an HOA or school district or county. You just have no control over the future. So if you want to have your own destiny planned out with good parks, then they should be city parks.
And I think some people even think that these are HOA parks, in Fox Point, that if I go over there, I'm risking, someone kicking me out because I'm trespassing on a private park. They don't realize that it's a city
It's a city
property.
park,
Yeah.
a city park.
How big is it?
5 acres. I don't know. It's
Nathan, may I add something as well?
yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Just a few years ago, and Mayor Little would remember this, and perhaps Dave, the city purchased 5.08 acres. It's property that's, the best I could describe it, it's behind Tractor Supply along the river. And at the time we purchased that property, it became available. The discussion was eventually we may get around to, putting a park there as well. So we do have that 5 acres right next to the river behind Tractor Supply that's city owned.
Go ahead, Wes.
When I was at one of the meetings with the folks doing the general plan, I asked them a question and I was surprised by it. How fast is Morgan growing? Is it like out of control? And the guy says, you'd be surprised we're growing at half the rate we should. So my next question was, is that good or bad? And he goes, well, it's good for you right now, but it will be bad because it's going to come like a tidal wave when it comes. And so I think that's something when we're thinking about this too, that it's coming, and get these things in place first as best we can, I think would be a grand idea.
Well, I want to bring up one more thing, because I think next time we'll dive into this. Also, there's parks per 1,000, but there's also proximity to parks. And a lot of cities have goals of being able to have a quarter, half mile walk to a park. And if you look at this map, right here. You have your main park. What's the name of that? Riverside Park and then the Fox Point. So north of the freeway, this whole side doesn't look like there's a city park up here. Nothing on the west side as well. And then you really have two big barriers. You have the I-84 barrier, which nobody's walking across that. And then you have the river barrier. And there will be some bridges, but for the most part, you have to keep in mind that those are barriers as well. And so is that also a goal you want to have of a certain distance to a walk up to a park or walking and biking to a park within a certain radius?
So, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mayor.
I'll refer this to Justin on that plan about the river walkway. That was going through the city. And it's fairly attractive when you look at the vision of it. But you can't count it as a park, but it's probably what a lot of, like a young mother pushing a stroller, beautiful place to go, things like that. But the one up on Mahogany is an HOA park, is that what I understand? So I don't know. I've never felt welcome to go up there. And I live that way, but so with that river, beautification and walkway and such, hooking off the Young Street Bridge, does make it so it's a little more walkable around our city. But I'm all in favor of developers providing space for parks. Maybe cluster homes and have more of a park or a trail.
Thank you. So we've got just another minute or two. Homework is to dig into this chapter in its entirety. Next month, we'll try to go into a little more depth. Justin has one more comment.
To your point, Mr. Chair, I think in addition to just having it be park space per the population, I think the amenities at the park make a big difference. So I put that in there is saying they need to be outfitted so you can use them, not just like if it's more pavilions, covered eating areas, playground.
Fox Point would be used more with a covered.
Correct. So
pavilion
I think
table.
that should be into the plan is to make sure they're outfitted properly because that just makes it more inviting and usable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's just want to go throw the Frisbee. It's a lot of fun. All right, any final thoughts before we close our working session? Well, we'll kick off in about 3 minutes then for our general session. Thank you.
Trails, fish, distance.
Good, how you doing? Yeah. See it?
See you. What's going on? It's back at it. It's causing trouble. All over.
We can't be content. You're just fine. We're in good shape.
You mean here? Yeah. We got. Let's see, Jay Ackett's not here. There's a few somewhere. Okay. Oh, to sign that. You didn't log in that way. He's sleeping.
Let me try that again with my microphone not muted. Good evening. Tonight is Tuesday, January 17th. I'd like to welcome everyone out to our general session for a planning commission meeting. It's good to have folks here in the room. For those of you that have joined us live, feel free to sign in if you haven't already at the front. I appreciate that. It's good to have you here. Look forward to your participation as we go through the evening. We also have folks that are joining us digitally. Thank you to all of you. Just as a reminder, tonight's session is being live streamed as well as recorded. So be aware of that as well. Tonight, we have 3 items on our agenda. We will be tabling our review of notes from the December 20th meeting. Those have not been finalized, and we will put those into our agenda next month to review. Tonight, and we'll take these items in this order. We have a public hearing that we'll be conducting with respect to the Rhinell Business Park amendment. We also, the next agenda item will be related to a project at 550 East 700 North with H&A Investments. This is a apartment complex, townhome complex that we will be reviewing at that point. And then the last several months, we've been saving time as a commission in these sessions to work through a mixed residential housing overlay zone. And that's how we'll wrap up the evening, is continuing to work on that effort. That being said, before we jump into this this first item with the public hearing for Rhinell Business Park. Just wanted to see if there's a representative from the project that's with us tonight. Very good. Ben, would you mind stepping up to the mic and maybe just providing an overview for us?
Yeah, it's just combining the two. There's an existing lot, there, Rhinell Business Park, and then there's another piece just to the, I guess it'd be to the east, that's adjacent to it, and we're proposing to have those combined.
Okay, thank you. From a staff perspective, any background comments to add to that?
Teresa, do you want to provide a little bit of background? I don't have any background on this project.
Basically, in our work session, we discussed that Rhinell Business Park has been established. They want to go ahead and add an additional parcel to one of the lots. Doing so creates a increase in the boundary of the subdivision, which requires an amended plat and a public hearing. Other than that, the parcel that's going to be be addition to the current lot that is in there is also in the manufacturing district. So they wouldn't need a general plan or a rezone for that purpose. So.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I think we can open the public hearing with respect to this project and give any members of the community that want to add to that. After we close the public hearing, we'll discuss this as a commission and then vote on any action from there. Do I declare okay. Yeah, I'm just going to declare the public hearing open. When we close it, we'll call for a motion for that. But the public hearing is now open with respect to the Rhinell Business Park amendment as outlined with adding this plat, this parcel to the plat, I should say. And so I'll open it up for anyone that would like to comment and share with respect to this project. Seeing no action or comments from members of the community and those present. At this point, let me just ask one question, and it's more of a curiosity question. The particular project, what's the intended use as far as we're combining the plats seems to make sense. It's all within the same zone. What is the intended use?
Yeah, Young Automotive is going to, they intend to put a service center on there. It would be a building pretty similar to Precision's, right next door.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just a little bigger, but something very similar. And it would, that would just service some of the cars and things that are at their dealership across the freeway there.
Great, thank you. Seeing no other comments from the public, I would call at this time for a motion to close the public hearing. Ray?
I make motion to close public hearing.
Thank you. Is there a second? Justin? Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Jason, I saw your hand as well. Thank you. The public hearing is now closed with respect to this. Our job is to make a recommendation to the city council with respect to this this amendment. And so as a commission, let's just discuss any open items or planning considerations that we should be aware of prior to taking action. Any thoughts from anyone else on the commission? Great. If you feel good and it's straightforward, then let's move forward.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just in light of Mr. Clark is here for item 1. We have opened and closed the public hearing. Do you have comment or not? Okay. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure because we have opened and closed that public hearing.
Thank you. At this time, with the commission, let's, if there's no further discussion, let's take action on the proposal. Who would like to
Mr. Chair,
raise a motion?
I'll
Thank
make a
you.
motion to approve the plat amendment, number 5 lot 2A5-R to combine as proposed.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second on the motion? Second that. Thank you. Motion seconded. Before we vote on it, I just want to clarify, I'd said earlier that we'd be making council on this as opposed to outright approval. I just want to clarify if that's not appropriate.
I'd amend my motion to send a positive recommendation to the city council
Okay.
to amend the plat.
Very good. Thank you. So motions on the table. Any other discussion on the motion? Let's vote on it. Indicate if you're in favor of the motion as outlined. And I see your hand, Jason. Thank you. It looks unanimous. Motion passes for a positive recommendation to the city council to amend the plat as outlined. Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll now move to our second agenda item. This is with respect to project located at approximately 550 East, 700 North. This particular project is within the sensitive lands district or zone overlay zone, which is why it's coming before the commission today. This sensitive lands was triggered because of the steep topography of the land that's in question here. And so as a commission, what we're looking at is making a recommendation to the city council. Normally, this would not go directly to the city council at concept approval, but because it's in the sensitive lands overlay zone, that is, that particular part of our ordinance is triggered. Let's get some staff perspective. There's a lot going on with this particular project, given the nature of the land that it's being proposed to be built on. And so we want to make sure that we understand all the building considerations of this project. If I can turn it over to you, Jake, for a moment to give us an overview, before we dive into some specific details, and then I'd like to hear from if there's a representative from the project as well, we'll do that next.
Thank you, Chair. On the screen is engineering plans provided by the applicant. This particular sheet is the demo sheet, and property is approximately 600 north and 700 east in Morgan City. It's zoned for multifamily, which is what is proposed. And the drive coming in the 600 north is owned by the city. The property is owned by the city, and the proposal is not to create a new public street, but essentially a private drive. And my understanding is that would be leased from the city, However, that is not the discussion tonight. Tonight is to consider a preliminary approval for this project being in the sensitive lands overlay. And also, are there any specific requests or requirements as part of that preliminary approval?
Jake, can I stop you there?
Yes.
I just want to clarify, concept approval versus preliminary approval.
Same thing.
Is that the same thing?
Yes.
I've thought those different historically.
On the agenda is concepts.
Yes, and it's not a preliminary plat, meaning it is a concept approval.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying
Just
that.
wanted to make sure we weren't skipping a step. So,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the applicant is not proposing a plat, but yes, it is concept. And so here's the site plan on the screen, 600 North coming in, private drive. This is a steep slope going up the hill, which is why it's in the sensitive lands. Proposed are two essentially apartment townhome type buildings, two building structures, one facing north, one facing south, covered parking, and then visitor parking here on the left side. You see that, Mayor? That's where the visitor parking is. 10 stalls here, 3 stalls here, and then landscaping surrounding it.
And did you indicate that road would be a private road or a city road?
Private.
Private road. Okay.
City-owned land, but private drive.
From what's outlined right at the bottom of 700 East, where that intersection of 700 East and 600 North.
Yes, here.
From that boundary on up that drive, it'll be maintained, even though it's city owned, it'll be maintained by the project.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
That's the type of thing that should go in a development agreement, which we don't have. I don't think there's a draft development agreement in place, but I think that would maybe even be covered in the lease with the city, but I don't even know, is there a draft lease agreement on it?
So just a clarification is that the applicant has already been in front of the city council regarding how they wanted the issue to occur, and that was discussed that there would be agreement. The agreement was not drawn up at this time because we obviously need to get through, we hadn't even gotten to concept or preliminary review, and so that'll be more than likely worked on through the final, when we start with the final and have that drafted, and it'll be part of the final.
Jake, I'd also add that Gary Crane was part of that meeting and said that the concept of a lease, city-owned road with private maintenance is very doable.
Great, thank you. Couple more things on the site plan. These are retaining walls. Let's see here, kind of a yellow color coming up. So single wall on the right, and then 2 retaining walls below building B, and then also retaining wall on the east side of the project, and then 2 retaining walls on the north side of the project as well. Dumpsters, 2 dumpsters right here coming in, and sidewalk to the front of the entry. The building A is elevated, and so there would be staircase up to each of the units, and little hammerhead turnaround at the end. 21 stalls for building A, and then 18 stalls for building B.
Are those open stalls, or are they covered in any way? I didn't see that in the elevation. I just wanted to clarify.
That they are covered, not
Oh, it says covered.
enclosed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, there it is right in front of me.
covered but not enclosed.
Okay,
So
sure.
a carport.
Yeah.
Essentially. So that's kind of an overview of the site plan. If you'd like, I can go through my comments. We can go through engineering comments first. We can
Just-
hear
just
from
one
the
more general
applicant,
Question.
whatever you want.
Before jumping in. The road, is there, because of the steepness, is there any limitation to how steep the road, in other words, it's gonna be a ski run? Or it's such a short area, maybe 200 or 300 feet that it can be as steep as it wants. What's the,
Yes, so it is a steep road, and I'm gonna pull up the grading plan. Utility, give me a second. Oh, there we go. So you'll see right here on the grading plan, I'm gonna zoom in, it's about 10%. 12% at this spot, 10.9% there, 9.8%, 8.5. So it starts out a little gradual and then steep and then steeper and then levels out a little bit, gets more gradual as it transitions into the parking area. And according to engineering review, it is acceptable for a private drive.
okay. Why don't we do this as we move in to continue to discuss this? If you want to start with some of the engineering items, and then I know we've got a couple gentlemen in the back of the room that can speak to some of the details of the project. There'll probably be some questions on some of these engineering items that maybe at that point we'll have you step to the mic and share some thoughts and your perspective, if that's okay. And then anything else that you'd like to add, at that time would be appropriate. So let's jump in that way if everyone's okay proceeding like that.
Okay. So on the screen is the engineering report prepared. Items that are complete, I'm not gonna touch on unless you would like to. Just want to confirm this, that a site visit by the engineer does confirm that slopes with greater than 30% have been avoided by development according to the current site plan. So this one, proposed water connection is from the lower pressure and will have a maximum pressure of 45. Maybe when the applicant speaks, he can just kind of update us on water pressure. So recommendation here from engineering that a separate document should be recorded on the property listing the requirements associated with the sensitive lands ordinance. Essentially just that be recorded on the property that it is in sensitive lands and that the current ordinance is applicable. And this is because there's not going to be a preliminary or final plat, just a single property in terms of ownership on the units. And so they won't be subdivided or platted. And so noting that on there is a recommendation. Question from the engineer on where some of the utility lines are. Place a note on the plat indicating that sewer lines, irrigation lines, storm lines, and water lines outside of 700 East will be private and responsibility of the owner. Requesting that. Also, in addition, one thing we haven't seen on the plans is an easement for the utilities coming up that 600 north. Typically that, the utilities go in the public right of way, because it isn't a public right of way in terms of the street. And also it's not a full street cross section. Then that's something for the applicant to figure out and provide on an updated drawing, is an easement of where particularly the dry utilities go, the cable, the power, gas, those kind of things, the dry ones. And that's from the engineer. Also a question on how the property will be served with irrigation water. Engineer says the developer will need to turn over shares of water or water rights for irrigation purposes. Developer to sign a long-term stormwater maintenance agreement. A question on fencing. And then also provide building elevations and materials. Building elevations and drawings have been provided. However, the building B, with it having the stairs and being elevated, is a little bit different. So having an elevation for both of those. And then I don't know if I didn't see in the elevations materials and colors. Engineer comment on retaining wall. Says they are tiered walls with a total height of 8 feet and 4-to-1 slopes. The detail provided doesn't match the site. Here's my comment on the dry utilities are located by the sidewalk, but there is no easement on the adjacent land. The Public Works Department, Power Department should approve any variation to the typical utility locations. So those are the engineering comments. I'll go ahead and provide my comments now. Quite a bit has been done. There's been a lot of communication with the applicant, with engineering and Teresa and myself, mostly through email, and they have done quite a bit of work. And so we felt like it was at a state where it could come before the Planning Commission. Regarding
Just to
Yes.
stop on that point, if I may, I want to acknowledge that, for those that are here with the project, that there has been a lot of work as this is iterated, and making some changes and understanding the nature of the steep lands and changing the occupancy, I think from 32 units down to 22 units, and accommodating I want to acknowledge the efforts that you're putting in, and thank you for partnering on, bringing this project to life in a way that makes sense. So appreciate the work you've done on that already. There's still some open things clearly that we need to work through. But I recognize you've already been along that journey for a bit, and appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair. Additional comments from the planning report. The project does meet basic requirements for parking, setbacks, and landscaping. Comment on that the portion to the west of the property, Jones Civil is found to be greater than 30%. And however, it is not proposed for development. Architectural plans.
Sorry, can I go back to the first
Yes.
one? It does meet, you're talking for those three things, setbacks, landscaping, parking. On the landscaping component, are we talking about percentage of land used? Or in other words, I'm curious if it's different for sensitive lands with the upper building, and then above the upper building is landscaping. I'm assuming some of that landscaping is intended to hold the earth together. But I don't know if there's a different requirement for, is that, just rock, or does it have to be vegetation that is, keeping the the land from falling down.
Yeah, so the city ordinance requires trees every so often, and that the area be landscaped. A very basic ordinance on that, and it does meet the ordinance. However, because it is in sensitive lands, it is according to Planning Commission's direction and discretion as to how things should happen because it's sensitive lands. And so that is up to the Planning Commission if they would like landscaping to be a little bit different. I make recommendations that that landscape plan needs to be updated, less grass area, trees not on top of retaining walls, things like that. I think it needs to be worked through and updated and represent the hillside environment and the site better.
Okay, Wes, go ahead.
On that retaining wall, since it is this steep of a slope, who's gonna be doing any maintenance on it after the project's turned over to everybody? Is it the city responsibility? Let's just say that you have a retaining wall that blows out or something. Who's responsible for
The
that?
property owner.
Property
Yeah,
owners?
definitely. Continue.
Yeah, any other thoughts before? Go ahead, Jake.
Okay. As I mentioned, architectural plans have been submitted. However, buildings A and B are a little bit different. So the Planning Commission may choose to request plans for building B. Also, the question of colors and materials and architectural style. Then some of my recommendations are that all conditions of engineering be met. And as I mentioned before, landscape plan does not meet low irrigation plans as recommended by the ordinance. The plan should show water-wise plantings, drip irrigation, grass should not be above the retaining walls for access purposes, and a professional should prepare the plan. So those are just some of the basic recommendations there. It's a very tricky site. The rest of my comments show that it is conforming to a lot of the setbacks. This is where maybe there's a question. I read the ordinance and I saw that fencing did conform and that it was 6 feet tall, but we can check with engineering on that, on the fence. So that's my overview. I'm sure we'll dive into some of the specific items.
Yeah, let's do that now, but could I have a representative from the project just provide some perspective on the project as well, and then we'll dig into some more details. Go ahead. If you'll state your name.
Thank you. Jordash Wardell. This is my brother and business partner, Dallas Wardell, and there's 4 of us that are partners on this project. The other 2 are smart and at home this evening. So I can address these comments. We've kind of, I guess our approach to development is just to take whatever's given us and keep working through and see where we end up at the end of the day. And we feel like we're really close on this one. There's a couple of little things, but we're excited for the project. We do have some other units that are almost the identical layout over in town. And the last couple of years, it's really interesting because somebody will give us their 30-day notice, and with that notice, they'll provide a name and a phone number without asking of my lease. And then we end up chasing without even advertising those referrals, if you will, because they're in the $1,100 to $1,200 price range, and that's still affordable for most young couples. So this project, I feel like, is very needed in this area in terms of the demand for it. So that's, I mean, obviously we're pushing for it because we want to make some residual income, but we're excited for that. We don't think there'll be a problem finding qualified applicants that can afford it. As far as the actual project itself, I think we've jumped the major hurdles. Of course, losing 10 units wasn't part of the plan, but we want to make a project that fits Morgan City standards, and we'll be back with another project. So we want to do it with some pride, if you will. So as far as any of the comments that I would address, we have prepared a little, I don't know how many of you got this 3D rendering of the project. That's kind of what they've looked like. This started out as kind of a plain building. We went through and added some of the roof features and stuff, just because there is an ordinance in that sensitive lands that we found that says that you guys will have a say in what those buildings look like. So we tried to spice them up and make them look as good as possible. That being said, we really don't have a preference on the colors or the exterior finishes. We'll do whatever the planning commission would want. I mean, we've proposed a synthetic stone because that's what a lot of people are doing right now, and a stucco. And that's because it's low maintenance. But that being said, we'll do whatever this planning commission wants on the exteriors to make them fit the surrounding area or whatever. That's just not a concern for us. And then as far as building A and building B on the architectural, to respond to one of your comments, building B, you look at that site plan, it's building B is the one that sits up against the hill. And then building C is the one that sits where it's gonna be flatter. So the way we've got it designed is building B, the actual back side of the building acts as retaining for that. So you'll walk in the front door, but to go out the back, you'll have to go upstairs and go out. And I have building B architectural drawings. Do you have those you can pull up? If you don't have it, I can forward it to you right now. But I think it's important to understand, because if you don't,
You want to pull it up?
one of them is going to be kind of on a big flat area, but the other one's up against that hill, and that's why we've got an architect who's actually designed a bunch of them that sit into the hill, and actually the back of the building is the retaining for it. So it gives you, 9-foot concrete retaining wall that holds up that hill. And it's really a nice fit the way he's designed it to tie in. I just emailed it to you, Teresa, if you've got it.
The second and the last page, what you printed out for us.
I think we have it.
Yeah, I know it's in the packet.
Yeah, that's it. If you look at building B, sheet 2, you can see that building that sits up against the steeper part that uses the back for retaining. I think that's at the bottom there, maybe. Oh,
Is that it?
yeah, that's it. If you wanted to share your screen.
Oh, yeah, I got it pulled up right there.
So scroll down to the next page. I think it's sheet 2. So if you'll dial into those details in the middle there, you can see that retaining that we've got called out to retain that upper. So that's building B, because it sits against the hill. Building A is just enter at one level, and then you can go out on the back patio at the same level. And if you look at those, if you look at the floor plans, you can see that the upstairs bedroom has kind of a walkout patio as opposed to the downstairs kitchen.
And this side door right here,
So that's just on the end units.
and units have a extra door?
They have a little extra door
Okay.
for the dog owners, I guess, that don't want to go upstairs.
How much from the back of that E to the retaining wall or the property line or whatever?
Oh, it's way up the hill. There's like we can't, because of the sensitive lands ordinance, we can't cut or fill more than 10 feet. And the civil engineer has verified that on several different occasions. So our design engineer verified it, and then it went through Jones Civil to verify that. So in that slope, we're gonna cut it down pretty close to 9 or 10 feet, but we're gonna retain it with the backside of that building foundation, which gives you a pretty solid build. And then everything else on the front retaining walls is all retaining of fill.
Is there a walkout on the back?
Yes, if you look at the, if you go down to the next page, you see that walkout. The end units have the walkout downstairs, but the upper units, if you go down one more page,
Where it says, oh, covered, okay, one more.
that's the bottom level. The top level that shows the walkout. There's a 36-inch landing
Okay, a little pad.
there, which will probably make that a little bigger.
Jordash, have you looked at making the faces of these different instead of just all the same? You know, some apartments you see somewhere, they have a little bit different design on each unit. Is that too big of a pain in the backside or?
Some of them they'll shift, they'll make like a little shift, to offset them a little bit. If they wanted them to kind of like offset, like move back and forth, that would make it a little more challenging. But if it's just the finished material where you wanted maybe some hardy board and batten style, and then some hardy board that was lap siding, so it was up and down versus if you wanted to change it that way, I don't think that matters.
Yeah, I've seen them around Layton and that, and there's a little bit different textures and some color schemes and stuff. So it just doesn't look like a big flat hotel in the front of it, I guess. I was just wondering if that may be a possibility.
Just to echo that, the third item on our agenda, what are we calling this thing? The mixed residential housing overlay zone. We've been doing a lot of work on trying to create that. And part of it is it drives more aesthetic appeal, even with these higher densities, where it almost doesn't even feel like an apartment complex. It almost looks like individual units, but it's designed in a way that, anyway, the idea is there might be some reference material in some of that work that may complement what you're talking about, Wes.
for sure.
I recognize, there's some challenges with the topography and the retention in the back and those kinds of things. But I think what I'm hearing is it's probably a little bit more than just the materials being used. I think there's a desire to see the actual architecture have a little bit more variety unit to unit, just versus what we're seeing here. But I don't want to speak for everybody.
And what I've seen, it might be like 4 units or just a little bit different, and then they just repeat it and maybe a different color scheme, but it just kind of breaks up the apartment feel. Just something that we've talked about on this commission.
Yeah, like I say, we'll make it whatever it is. You're pretty limited in terms of what you can do with 16. These things are like 16 wide and 34 deep. So as long as it didn't, we would do whatever. But when you start adding, like some of them, I've seen those ones you're talking about because of maybe the way the land is, they offset them to kind of break them up a little bit. And I think that would be challenging. But if it's just the finishes or changing up even so they're not uniform on every unit.
If I could make a comment, I think what Jordash is saying is because of the retaining wall function of those units, bearing is going to be difficult. However, you have mentioned the materials, making the facades, vary that so that one unit next to another unit is not exactly the same. Like you say, go from board and batten to hardy board in a different way, or stone, or different colors. But also one option is maybe the roof line varies that half of the units are at one then it pops up. So you're not having to go back or forward, just varying that roof line or even not the roof line, but over the the dormers or something like that. And so that
Just truss variation.
kind of,
Don't bring buildings in and out. Maybe you should let truss variation and color variation.
yes, kind of, so like a gable's a little bit taller or shorter on the front, that kind of thing.
Or even on these like upper windows and that you'll see them bring it out a foot. And then the next unit will be flat or whatever. Just
Above
an
that.
idea to make it just a little bit less big apartment complex that I'm seeing all over Layton. Just an idea.
Yeah, we're here to do whatever we need to get it approved in an economic way that makes sense.
Just out of curiosity, are the setbacks maximized between the two buildings? So they face each other, but let's say, and this may or may not be feasible, I'm just asking, but let's say you can't do anything with the back because it's a retaining wall. That's going to be a flat piece, but could you bump out the front on a unit here and there by 2 extra feet, let's say, or does that then we've now violated the setbacks because we're already at the limit?
There's not really the determining factor for the front setbacks. We're at the back of the property, like you say, for the setbacks required. But the front of the property, really the determining factor is how much room you need to come in and turn and park. And we're kind of at as small as you want to go and still be able to get in and out comfortably. And so if we lost a couple extra feet, maybe you could move one forward and then the next one back. So it's really only 2 feet, but you were altered. Probably would still work. You'd lose 4 feet if you did a 2-foot step out on each one.
Because kind of what I'm wondering is, how much does it matter? In these two that are facing, one's facing the mountain and it's half underground. Then you have the two facing each other that only the owners or tenants will see. And you've got the carport thing in front of it. So the facade already is largely masked because of that. It almost feels like the one that matters the most is on that lower building, the part that you can see from lower, from lower down, the back side of that lower building.
The back side of the building. See, that's a great point. You're not going to see those front of those buildings.
And without redesigning trusses and everything, I mean, what's code for cantilevering out at 18 inches to put like a window or something? That's all I'm thinking. And then you don't have to redesign trusses and all that kind of stuff. And I know what you're saying. It could get, crazy pretty easy if you have to go in and try to redesign, the structural part of it, but just punching a window out here or there. So it's just, I think what a lot of us are saying, not just a flat building with windows and doors in it is what they're trying to get away from, when it's a little bit of character in there is what I'm thinking.
To Nate's point, nobody's gonna see those fronts.
Yeah.
What you're picturing, nobody's gonna see those fronts. If your carport's sitting right in front of them, nobody's gonna see the front.
Yeah, you're
We
right.
ask them to do a bunch of stuff that really doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I don't mind thinking about the backside of that lower building.
You're retaining wall.
Well, not the lower building. Is there a retaining wall?
No, the back side is going to be a full 2-story view.
No, it's full. That lower building is going to be 2 stories. You just said it.
The retaining wall hold. But go ahead.
No, so the retaining wall holds the upper and
But-
then the bottom is
but
just a slab.
But behind the bottom, you also indicated there's retaining walls. When Jake went through his
But
analysis,
it's below the building.
It's the
elevation.
same height as the building.
right?
Yeah, so it'll be two levels exposed.
Right.
On that
Looking up
lower part.
from below, On the hill, it'll be 2 levels exposed.
So you'll have a retaining wall.
Basically, a
two levels.
retaining
Then
wall
on
to
top
hold
of the
that there.
retaining wall area though, let's see the rest of it. I don't think it's hidden by the retaining wall.
No, it's not. The retaining wall holds it there. So if you pump those in now, then you're infringing on the retaining
I
wall.
see what you're saying, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But are there options
The retaining wall
architectural?
doesn't cover it for sure. It doesn't. It holds the base there. The retaining walls will hold your footings in place. You start bumping those out, then you gotta move the retaining walls.
Okay.
I'm not an engineer, but I think I visualized what Jake said was there. Look at it again, Jake.
Slight, I mean, that would be according to his engineer, if it would vary. I just look, it's a little bit interesting because the rear setback is 30 feet and the front is 25. What do you call this? Yes, it's facing 700 east. And so is that the front setback? But it's the back of the building, so it is at the rear setback.
That's your department, Jake.
It meets both at this point, but if you bring it in, then one of them, it wouldn't be. So,
Well, so for me, if we're gonna be targeting architectural, if there's gonna be additional investment and cost of the project, I'd rather see it invested on that backside of that building. Personally, because that's what more folks are going to be exposed to in the community. I don't know what that looks like. There's architectural challenges clearly with the retention that's in place, but within those constraints, there's probably more that can be done than when I look at the rear elevation and just see flat wall with a bunch of windows. I don't know. That's a thought.
Mr. Chair, I think we're saying, we're not designers or architects. What we would like to see is if there's a way to add more character into the building, into the places that will be seen. We would very much appreciate that. So if that's just different finishes on facade, I think that would be neat on the next, as you go through the project, see what character is possible with this.
if, however you end this item, if there is gonna be a motion, then you'll need to put something specific in a motion. So just keep that in mind.
They're not getting any direction.
Right.
We'll let them walk out of here not knowing what we want. We've all said something different. I've always felt poor for even though they don't know what we want. If we want 7 different things, how they design, what we want.
Well,
Somehow they can maybe clarify that.
how do we articulate that, from, like I said, we might have 5 different opinions of what we want.
And they're faced with, they bring something back, whether we're gonna accept it or not.
Yeah, So
And they can
here's,
try.
here's a thought, just to reiterate what I said earlier, then, I want to be sensitive to the idea that you're investing in a project and it needs to return on that investment. You don't want to over-invest in something that's not going to pay itself off. I get that. And that's why, for me, I don't need, despite how I might feel about the frontage, in, the 2 units that face each other, that to me is less important because those tenants are gonna see that. That's less important to me.
Just clarify that point with the rest of the commission.
Okay.
One point and clarify that point with the rest. Take straw poll.
So agree with that, disagree with that?
What would you like to see on the front? How much variation you want to see on the front? With the idea that the chairs mentioned, the fronts will be facing their carports and facing each other. Who's going to see the fronts will be those that drive in that live there. Nobody else in the whole valley is going to see the fronts. So the question he's asking, how much expense and effort you want them to go to redesign their fronts? That's the question, to give them some clear direction.
Well, they already said if it wasn't a big deal, they would look at it and see if they could come up with something that wasn't just.
We need to give them some direction what we want. We need to give them some direction what we want.
I want to bring one item to your attention. The city ordinance does require trees. I think it's on 30 feet. And the landscape plan does have trees. You'll see here around the perimeter. So there is some of that in terms of it, with a landscape plan and planted trees and some growth and maturity. It's not going to be entirely exposed as well. Just wanted to let you know that. And this was my point, that these trees, this plan does need to be updated. I mean, there's places that don't need to have grass, not good for maintenance, water conservation, and also trees in the wrong places with retaining walls.
Yeah.
Those items being aside, which could be in your recommendation, it's not going to be entirely exposed. Just wanted to bring that up. Not that needs to change your architecture recommendations, but just want to mention that.
Thank you. So just
Can
to,
I make a comment?
yeah, go ahead.
Go back to what you said, the rear offset, is it 30, or do we look at that different and not have it be 30? And what is?
Well, okay, so the setback, the city ordinance for the rear is 30, and for the front is 25.
So can you look at that as it facing 700 and consider it the front and give us a 25-foot offset there? And then that would allow a little bit of room to maybe add some pop, like you guys are saying, maybe a couple of buildings jogged out. Or if you go back, I mean, I can kind of see what you're talking about, looking at the back of this building. I don't know if you can pull it up on sheet 2 of building C.
Yeah. 1 second here.
Although, Jake, if you went ahead and had that be the frontage, then the front doors would be on that side as well, correct?
Well, a front means that faces the street is typical.
Yeah.
But it would be the rear building facing the front. I think that's at the planning commission's discretion. I think where it's mutually beneficial, I see no problem with that. Do you see the question there that
Defining what front is.
yeah. And so in this case, that does provide leeway to the applicant to vary the building, which is something the planning commission has expressed interest in, which I think would be nice. 25 to 30, there's not a big difference there. It's plenty of space.
I think in order to do anything of what you guys are saying, we got to look at that first and say, okay, if we're going to do this, we probably need to adjust that to 25 feet. If we're going to consider that the front,
If
and
we're
then that
hearing-
allows you a couple of feet to add some pop out. Or if you go to that sheet 2, that's not.
This
Yeah,
it?
that one right there.
Yeah.
So if you look at that one, I mean, looking at the back of that, yeah, it looks pretty bland. Right there. If you scroll down and look at that version, which is front, it's got the different eaves, the different roof lines, and then it's got the overhang above, between the 2 levels. I don't know what they call that, but it's the eave we had him add for this. Yes, that.
Right in here.
Yes,
That
we
is-
had him add that just to break it up. So if you look at.
Oh, right.
Yes, yep, it's just an overhang. It's, I don't know, if it's 2 foot or 30 inch, but it's an overhang to kind of break the whole look of the building up. So if you was to able to maybe, and maybe you guys don't even like to look at that front, but looking at that front, how all broken up it is, and then the eaves over the windows and different things. If you was to add that look to the rear of that, would that appease you at all? Would that feel pretty bland at that point?
What I'm kind of talking about, not like getting crazy, it's just maybe building the window out on one and then flat on the next and doing something like that to just so everything just isn't flat. And then Jordash talked about different materials, and call me crazy, I never lived in an apartment, but I would think it would be nice if mine looked a little bit different. I mean, it's maybe a psychological thing, but I live in the blue apartment up there or the yellow apartment or whatever. There's some in Layton that are like crazy colors that aren't great looking, but they're different. And that's all I'm talking about. Maybe them windows, having them come out 1.5 feet or something, and then the next one in or anything, just so isn't flat. That's all. I'm not talking about something crazy.
So let me pull some of this in if I can for a minute. But, there's a couple of things that I'm hearing, and let's just align. One, I'm hearing that there's discretion at the commission level to define what front is. And that discretion could potentially provide more options for the developer. You know, and as long as that's an option, then that's something that we can consider. You know, in our definition of that. We didn't finish the straw poll. I'd still like to kind of get a sense of where people stand right now. You know, if we're gonna spend, none of us are architects or designers. You know, we can look at this and have 5 different opinions on what we personally like, and 5 different people are gonna have 5 more opinions. So it's not entirely definitive, but we do want to kind of have the best interest of the aesthetics and for the community and how it complements what we're trying to do. And so I'd love just to get perspective on, you know, before we continue to go down this path and where everybody else is at. I know in our working session, this was one of the observations was, well, I'm not loving the elevation. Just at first glance, it wasn't. So go ahead. It looks like you're.
Well, there's,
You're never gonna see them.
Teresa, can you pull up Google Maps and go to
You'll
the
never see
street
them.
view? Or
Right.
Jake, can you do that? Because the more I look at this, one of the things of looking north, yes.
Yep.
And you'll see what we're,
You'll never see the buildings from the road.
so yeah, right, no, too far,
Live in them,
back a little bit,
You live in Will, yes, that's the point. Yeah, I
You're
agree with that.
right
that's
there, yep. And if I'm not mistaken, it's behind that, it's to the right, so behind those trees, that mobile home and that house, right?
Yep. Right between those 2 houses is the access right there.
So the visibility, I guess what we're saying is you might not really ever see it from the road. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out, just so we're not saying we're on a flat, like everything's visible. This is definitely got some things, and the trees might not be there forever, granted, but that's what it is. Whatever recently, however recent this picture was taken. It's,
You'll never see them.
So, Mr. Chair, can I make a comment?
Please do.
When we have the back of the first building facing 700 East. And we're calling that sort of the front. And the front easement's 25 feet, even though it's the back of the building. Can we take that 5 feet and maybe use it in between the 2 structures, the parking and more space there for cars to get in and out, rather than have it tight? Because 5 feet would make a lot of difference. It would, as you come in and try to turn into a parking spot.
You do both. The first buildings could come in, and so you get a variation, an offset. And then the other ones are at that 30 foot, and so you get that little bit of variety. Even though these buildings aren't going to be very visible to the street, they still are part of the community. They're still a part of the fabric of the city. I mean, it matters to the residents, and are there ways to, without making them cost burdensome, to, you know, still add variety of color and materials and styles, you know, to have a little bit more? Just a question for the planning commission.
Does that extra 5 feet, if the actual building was moved back, so there's more space between the 2 buildings, does that change the nature of the retention wall? Or is it still, it doesn't have to be moved or redesigned, or they don't compromise the weight?
Let's see. Yeah, I've got that in here. So it's 25 there.
Even when both zones are residential?
Multifamily and single family.
Well, they're different zones, yes, but they're both residential zones.
I found 25 feet if you want to take a second look and see if you're seeing anything different. Yeah, that's what I found in my report.
That's the retaining.
To the property line. So the building to the property line, when it's RM 15 to a single family, then it needs to be a minimum of
Is
25.
that retaining wall right on the property line?
Not quite. You'll see, looks like a couple feet off.
And it is required to have fencing between single family and multifamily. So the retaining wall and then they'll have a fence. Is that what you're planning? So it's the
Yep,
fence.
see it
I'm
right here
thinking.
on the landscape plan, 6 foot high white vinyl fence.
And just to let you know, that's the normal on anything, but in the sensitive land, on any of the portion that's 30% or more on fencing has to be brown or black chain link fence coated. Just to let you know.
Yeah, either one's.
So like in the back, you might have to change.
Easy.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's something I think in the past the commission looked at as well. We have changed some of those parts chain link to vinyl. We've done that in the past. That's something we could consider if the council wants to.
I think the intent of the sensitive lands is when you have a 30% or more a grade to be more natural with the surrounding elements and not be so intrusive, you know, with the big, huge fences, to have something that kind of melts into the landscaping. That's what I think the intent was of the sensitive land fencing portion, but that's only on 30% or more.
Thoughts?
Well, all of the same as all of yours. I haven't really said anything in this discussion because I don't know. I can see, absolutely, I respect that we want to make this a profitable project for you, and we certainly don't want to impose arbitrary restrictions or requirements, but that's exactly it. We don't want to be arbitrary. I'm concerned about being consistent, and whatever we do here, we're going to need to do for the next developers that ask. So if we want to establish standards, they need to be uniform. And yet I can see the argument that nobody's really going to see this. Does it really matter? And those are my concerns that I'm battling back and forth with.
Go ahead, Wes.
So I have built a few things in my life. And so one of the things would be add to the cost would be to change the foundation and offsets and all that. So what I propose is just simply fascia with the cantilevers out or something, not change foundations, none of, run your straight foundations, and then just make the front of the apartments just a little bit different, but not to make it so it's a pain in your neck that you have to re-engineer and forms and all that kind of stuff. It's just something that's simple, but not just flat. That's my proposal to this.
And part of what I'm hearing too then is that it provides more flexibility for the developer and as well as more functionality for the prospective tenants to declare the front to reverse it. As long as we can, and then that's within our jurisdiction, that feels like a win-win. And give that extra 5 feet to improve the functionality in the drive, as well as maybe doing some of the stuff that's been discussed. What other thoughts on this?
Mr. Chair, I can't see the dimensions between the carports and the common drive going into it. I'm just wondering, 5 feet is a major amount of space when you're trying to get a vehicle turned in or back out. Does it show between the two carports? 14, so that would bring it to 19?
Which specific spot are you looking at?
Just between the two carports. The common drive that goes in, where all the numbers
here?
are. So if you add 5 feet there, 31 feet, that'd be easier for snow removal, for just functionality about getting your cars in and out. Just my thoughts. Doesn't,
26 is a typical drive for this type of project.
right, but it's one of the few that we have in the city that they're backing out against each other, right? And I'm just thinking if it's more, it's not a big expense to them, but we have that more space between the two carports just seems, I would like it more if I lived there.
That's easy. I mean, we would much rather add that and go back to the redesign of this and try and figure out what's gonna be appealing to you guys. I mean, as far as the building, you know what I mean? Because right now, we're saying, okay, from what I'm getting, you're gonna get 5 more feet. Go back to your architect and figure out, do what we're gonna like. We really don't know what you're gonna like. I guess that's where I'm at. When I'm reading. And it's easy to say, well, let's pop a window out here, which I think would look good. But it's the way these are designed now, like your walls that set your firewall that separates the buildings. It's just gonna be so hard, you could go on here and maybe pop the entire building itself out 2 feet to the back, and then the next one maybe steps back in. It's just gonna be really kind of challenging to start to do that. And honestly, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we don't go that direction and do some different things and then come back and say, well, this looks like a cut up piece of crap now. And then we're back, then where do we go? So I don't know. I personally like the look of the front of the building. The back of it is a little bit bland for sure. But I think the roof lines and the different eaves in the front that we put on helps break up the front, the back. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Let me take a stab at it. My years of doing this, I've seen guys in those chairs come back and redesign something. I even say, no, I don't want that. If I redesign it again, I'd like to avoid that piece. Not for these guys, but for somebody else. No. What I think I heard Wes saying, I appreciate, I saw, and I had down the end there, is I want to think, and Justin, Nate can chime in. What I heard Wes say was not worry about bumping buildings in and out. Leave the buildings where they are. Heard Wes earlier say, don't worry about changing trusses, leave those where they are. First thing you said was you're willing to change colors and materials on the building. I think that's kind of what Wes said, that would give some distinction to merely change colors and materials on the building. Some Hardy board, some stucco, some variations, some of those things. That would give it some character. Another thing I agree with Wes on is I don't like those. I don't think that they're obnoxious color variations. Those to me are not nice changes.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing Wes say, and what I'm getting on me and what I like to say is don't change the elevator, don't bump anything in and out as far as the foundation, as far as the building as a whole. Don't worry about changing any truss configuration. Merely change some exterior materials and colors of exterior materials. That's what I'm hearing. Did I hear you correctly, Wes?
Yep.
You're not on the end.
Just one other thing he was talking about was
Go
some
ahead.
of that cantilevering with
You talk about maybe a window or a window seat on a window here and there, maybe that's a possibility. Ask me about 2 stairs to make a window seat on one and or a window cantilever, change the cantilever windows. Maybe it's one thing we thought would make the possibility. I think we're okay on that much. Does that make sense, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Jake, you okay with
Yeah,
that?
yeah. And that with
Yeah,
whatever else you're gonna
yeah.
put in a motion.
Yeah, we'll include that, there's a bunch of stuff in the motion.
No, it sounded good.
Let's clarify that for the contract.
I think that's clear. That could be that could be clarified and put in the motion and you could do that and it could be even you could ask them to come back with that, or you could even approve tonight, provide the conditional approval with these conditions, and that could be one of them. And that way they're on their way and they have their checklist of what to do.
Jake, just one more thing on this. We're thinking about 10, 15 years down the road. And are people taking ownership? Because let's face it, this is the future. There's a lot of young kids that they're not ever looking at buying a home. So that's going to be their home. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I would want my place just a little bit different, than just, I live in that apartment up in North Morgan. That's kind of what I'm thinking, and I don't want it to be difficult, like Ray said, but just something.
You can do a lot with just stone variation. Stone coloration, stone styles, stone colors, brick styles, stucco styles. You can do a lot with those kind of exteriors, one to another, I think. I think I'm getting nods everywhere up here. That help, gentlemen?
Yeah, I
Clarify?
think it's a place to go as far as colors. What?
Colors and materials for that matter. I mean, do you want hardy board? Do you want synthetic stone? Because we can change, like one unit, we can go up around
I think
the door.
I think a combination of those
I
things.
think the variation is what
The earth tones kind of stuff that we're trying to stick with.
the answer is yes.
Stay with,
All of the above.
we have a list of materials. Stay within that list of accepted materials.
Where's that list?
Trace, we've been talking about tonight in this one, there's a list of materials. And just stay within that list of materials. And just vary, variation.
I think you're gonna have to give them that list.
Okay.
The only list that we do have is in the historic overlay zone, which this is not in.
Okay.
Though it does encourage in the sensitive land to have colors and materials that are in harmony with the surrounding hillsides. So of course, you're not going to do like a bright orange, pink and
Brown,
blue
grays,
house.
red, oranges and bricks.
so, it'd be
Right.
some earth tones
We
and
have a
things.
comment by Jason.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate all the conversation and the spirit of wanting things to look different, and I get it. I feel some of those same feelings, but at the same token, I also support, this is an apartment complex. The people pay $1,000 a month to live here. Apartment complexes don't look, they have a certain way about them. They have carports in front of them. So I would just like to share that kind of the spirit of where this conversation is leading is, encouraging the developer to make it different and unique and special and a home and all those kind of things. But, a pig's a pig, an apartment complex. And so I would just like to say that as much as I feel those same type of things, I could let myself go down that road of wanting the colors to look different or the exteriors to look different. I'm also withholding that judgment or maybe passing that requirement on to them because I don't know if it really matters. I don't know for us to impose that on them is really for us, bump the window out or make this finish stucco or that finish hardy board or things like that. It's an apartment complex. Apartment complexes are built for certain reasons, and affordability is one of them. And all these requests we're asking aren't in line with affordability. So I just want to make sure that I'm conveying that even though I understand and support the differentiation of it, I don't want to get lost in that being such a focus of this meeting. I mean, the bottom line is you're going to pull into a road with carports in front of it. And whether that building is brown or black or hardy board or stucco, like who cares? You're pulling into an apartment complex with carports. Like 99% of people don't notice, wouldn't know the difference. And so kind of for us to, I understand the spirit of holding and wanting more, because I always want more for our city. I get it. But at the same time, I don't want to be unrealistic about, if what they're submitting is good enough and it follows our rules, we can sit here and get creative as we want and waste all kinds of time in creative ways to make it, look prettier. And I don't necessarily know that. I just want to have that alternate voice that even though I agree with some of the prettiness, I also understand to avoid all the prettiness and just move forward, it'll probably be okay too. So.
Thank you for your perspective. Yeah, I mean, so there's plenty to consider here, and one of them is maybe, this idea are aesthetics and affordability mutually exclusive? And I don't know that, in my opinion, I don't know that they have to be. I mean, there's certainly a threshold there. But I'm more concerned about the sustainability, as Wes was talking about, into the future. Are we building something that, it's gonna be great for the first few years? Are we building the slums for 20 years from now? Or is this still going to be a nice building that's attracting, the tenants and families, and 20 years from now, it's still a respectable place to be, because it hasn't, gotten a reputation or attracted, in other words, thinking for the future, right out the gate, it's going to be nice. What's it going to be in 20 years or 30 years? So that to me is where the aesthetics matter more, is down the road. And I realize there's going to be remodels and things, along the way. I get it. But
It doesn't matter if you're putting rock or stucco or hardy in 20 years. 20 years is 20 years, and that material's, the sun's gonna do what it does to all of it. I don't know. The only sure thing that stays the exact same, I guess, is brick. And in 25 years, it's gonna look the exact same as it does the day you put it on, or pretty close, at least closer than any of the other materials.
so that's just another thought, is all. But it feels like we've got some perspectives, that we may have, competing motion potentially. I don't know, but we've got some perspectives. That I guess the next question, just to move past the architecture, what other design, not design, what other planning issues are there that we haven't yet addressed with respect to this concept? Did you have some open ones? You mentioned you did in the working
I
session.
don't want to open this can, I just mentioned it, we don't have to finish this can off on this project, but another piece is the landscape piece. As we look down the road, we've talked a little bit in some circles about what do we do water-wise, landscape-wise, we need to change those requirements some. And that's too big of a fish for us to fry tonight. But as an example, in the past, we've got people put grass in park strips. And this other deal we're talking about tonight, it says no grass in park strips kind of thing. And so on that mountainside, could the landscape be different than our required landscape for down on the flat? Do we still want some mountain stuff on that hillside? Is that okay? Without delving into all the landscape ordinances, I don't know how much leeway we have in that landscape piece. And I don't want the people here view on that,
You do because it's in the sensitive
okay?
overlay.
So at some point, we need to dive into that, say we want full grass, full tree, just like downtown park. Or are you okay to do something different, water wise on that hillside? It's not gonna take much water, but will still, be appropriate.
So this is building B and C that
Yeah.
made it. I'm assuming building A is the one that got nixed. Where would that have been? I know what's proposed for, is that on the
This
west,
side, the west-
the west
west
side?
side.
A and C. Oh, A and B, and so C was the other one.
So I mean, my question was gonna be what's happening with that land? Doing anything with it, putting any landscaping on it, is that the green space or is it too? I don't know.
This is what it says, existing landscape to remain,
Hillside,
and whatever you want to ask the applicant.
whatever's there.
Got to keep it in the green belt, so it'll have some sheep on there. No,
Is there a
it's-
possibility in the future that they can figure out how to use that? So is this design gonna work? That to drive through and that you'll be able to use that without changing much?
The majority of that lot is not 30%. The majority, there's one area in this.
It's right in the middle, right?
Yeah, we just, because we had already invested in this ground, we just kind of surrendered on that other portion of it. And we just want to go with that and not, we don't want to open that can. But we are designing the road as wide as we can to accommodate it if in some future setting that we want to come back and try.
So
We're leaving the door open.
this part of it will tie, if you can build in the future to that.
Yeah.
Will that extra 5 feet help at all for that?
Not really, because it's on this.
Okay.
Yeah, not really.
I do want to ask one question if I may. Is this going to have this trash enclosure? Are these the doors? I'm just thinking about coming down the sidewalk and a 5-year-old going right into the doors of the trash enclosure there. I mean, doors are good because they're ugly and smelly. It's nice to be closed, but also I'm just seeing a pedestrian conflict here with the dumpster.
I don't know why our architect put it on there. I don't know that those trash enclosures require doors. On the other developments we did, they just had the enclosure.
The 3 sides.
Yeah, and the front was open. I would assume that would just be open and no swinging doors, because that does create a hazard.
Good point.
What else?
Anything else you want to wrap up with landscape?
I think the mountainside is different than downtown, the flat as far as greenery and far as watering and that kind of thing. If we're gonna look at down the road, a more water saving kind of thing, you need to look at landscapes.
Is your intent with that to say, hey, instead of grass, let's put gravel? Is that, I don't for
know.
conservation, was that, what would be the intent of moving towards a different direction, I guess, on the hillside?
So plants that utilize less water, water-wise plants.
Yeah, if I could make a comment, so I am licensed landscape architect. I've done millions of projects or a lot, but I would do grass.
Are you looking for work?
No.
Okay.
I would do grass behind the buildings, but then not in between the retaining walls all around coming, a good rule of thumb is if the only time you're stepping on it is to mow it, then it probably doesn't need to be grass.
Okay.
And so certainly in the play spaces, behind the units, that would be great, right? You want your residents there out playing and having little barbecues or hanging out. But in between the retaining walls and the little areas, colored rock with water wise plants on drip irrigation is good. And I think that's the direction the city's going to be going. I see us doing a landscape ordinance this year. We've talked about it, and so it's on the list.
Yeah, easy. That's all. This seems
I mean,
like we're
that'll-
trying to figure out what makeup to use in the actual structure here. I was hoping tonight that we would just make sure that, you know, the development looks fine. All those things we've kind of discussed tonight, the meeting's kind of headed towards the finished product, which I'm grateful for. But I guess our hope tonight for tonight's meeting, and I don't understand the process. I need to understand it to better, but in my mind, if you're going for a plat approval or a subdivision, you have to concept, preliminary and final, where this is just going to be a record of survey. I don't know if with this meeting, we could throw whatever the motion is to say, okay, these are the concerns we want addressed, including all the engineering comments, but the site itself, which doesn't seem to have a lot of concerns, and they were mainly addressed by Jake and Matt through that review process. We're just looking at this point to figure out how we can start getting that site ready to build on, and these questions, we can come back and with the design and all of that, and make sure that everybody's good on the building, the actual look of the building.
And just, oh.
I guess in a round, we're trying to say, well, is the next meeting we come to gonna be the final? Is that, it's kind of, or what's the next meeting, or when is the next?
Or can we start the site and then come back for final approval on the actual appearance of the buildings, or, yeah.
Well, to your point, the reason you're even talking to us tonight about this is because it's on a sensitive land
Yeah.
zone. Outside of that, you're exactly right. You'd just be working with staff and go through the process. It wouldn't even come to us.
Right.
Because it's on sensitive lands, there's actually two components. You know, one is we're making a recommendation to the city council. So this same concept approval will be heard before the city council as well.
Yep.
And then I'm assuming that the next step is, do they go through preliminary and final, or just straight to the final?
The component that you have that's a little bit different than some of the other projects in our sensitive land is the issue with the road. We first of all had to get direction from the city council. What do you want to do with this road before you, the applicant, can even proceed? So that's why we had that meeting first, and this one would be to review, send it on to the city council. They're gonna be talking, now that you've got an applicant, now we can move forward on a development agreement and leasing of the land for that, and then probably more than likely come through a final, because the planning commission has authority for the design, the landscaping, and those elements that aren't normally in a regular apartment complex. But still, again, city council gets a final approval on anything in sensitive lands. That's how I would see we would progress in this. Do you agree? or
Yeah, I would agree. And that final could include the lease agreement, the development
other
agreement.
stuff?
Else. So it's
Like everything.
yeah, everything.
So is that, are you saying that could be the next meeting, or?
No. So you have to do everything twice. Concept with the planning commission, concept with city council. And then even after this meeting, it could go straight to city council. And in the meantime, you could begin updating the drawings or whatever you need to, so you can have that final submission to come back through one more time.
Yeah, I just was confused with your initial question on that, because we came a year ago for kind of a concept before we started all this design. And then I was thinking, man, this is preliminary kind of approval, shape everything up, and then we come back one more time, understanding that one time equals here and with the city council. So it sounds like we're on the same page essentially. I just was trying to figure out how that process in my head.
Yeah, so I anticipate, depending on what that recommendation is tonight.
Okay.
City council, shore up your development agreement and those things that legislative body needs to do first.
Okay.
And then planning commission, city council for another.
I thought I heard the beginnings of emotion flowing over here. If that's the case, feel free to proceed.
I move that we send the city council a positive recommendation for concept approval of H&A Investment Apartment Complex, approximately 555 East, 700 North, with the comments that before it comes back for final, that the engineering report would be addressed, and those things that still are not complete would be completed. And I would move, and in addition to that, with that recommendation, I recommend that the things that Jake mentioned in his report, which are under number 4, to be aware of those 4 items, 4A, 4B, 4C, and 4D, to accomplish those before final. And then on the engineering report, the items that are marked incomplete on the September 28th report, some of those are marked complete, some of those are marked incomplete. The request that those are marked incomplete, they would be finalized also with staff and engineering before final. That's my motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second that.
Motion is seconded. Discussion on the motion.
So just to be clear, we have not included any stipulation on architecture or exterior requirements. Okay.
There's 2 things I'm thinking of that I'm curious about as well, just with respect to what's notably missing. One, the flexibility potential with declaring the front as the back or vice versa. Is that is of interest? Would you consider that?
Who makes that final decision, Jay?
In this case, you can.
Is it-
Typically, staff would
It's at least staff
would do that, but because of
identifies
the
front and back.
ambiguity of the situation and being sensitive land, planning commission can. So you can just say, we recommend that the 25-foot setback be allowed for the south side.
Definitely. Yes.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
I would like to include that in the
You
motion.
would like to include
For
that in the
sure,
motion.
for sure.
Okay.
One question on that, but would we want to give that discretion to the developer?
We
Or
could
do
set
we
it,
want to set it?
we could set it 25 and they can decide if they want to still keep it 30. They wouldn't have.
Yeah,
to-
they can
wouldn't have-
use
they
that
can use
extra
it or
5
not
feet,
use it.
however.
I'm saying is
however they
we're
want.
not forcing them.
They
into
could
that.
stay
Okay,
at
good.
30.
Okay.
We were saying we would designate 25 out of the setback. They could stay at 30 if they wanted.
So you would accept that in
Yeah.
the motion. Aaron, would you still
Yeah.
second that? Okay. The second thought that I had, that we hadn't, I just saw it in my note, was the geotechnical piece, and I just want to make sure that was covered.
It's already completed.
It's an engineering.
It's already completed.
It's already done.
Okay, perfect. So the motion is outlined then with the change that we've added is on the table. I want to point out, from Justin's comment that we are making no architectural recommendations or stipulations with this. motion.
And the reason on that is they've heard what we've said. And they run the risk of, if they don't do anything, come back, we can deny it on their final. They won't take the risk of coming back without doing the things we asked them to do. That's why I didn't think we need to specify. They've already got the clear message.
In addition,
They would dare come back without addressing that.
He acts like he taught us all in school or something.
in addition, Commissioner Little mentioned the staff report. which does indicate that they do need to specify the materials, color,
They need to.
and all of
specify
that.
for the
So,
final.
so
It was
the
in the-
architect
it
is gonna have to go through the buildings
Want to make sure that's that's covered.
one more time.
Great. Any other discussion on the motion? Let's vote. All in favor of the motion, please indicate. And I see your hand, Jay. Motion passes to forward on to the city council with positive recommendation as outlined by Commissioner Little's actions. So thank you. A motion passes. And
Thank you.
Jordash and Dallas, thank you as well. Appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
We do have a third item on our agenda, which is kind of a working item that we've been focused on. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to turn that right over to you, Jake.
Okay.
And again, it may be worthwhile to set a time limit on, we could stay here until midnight continuing on this. We're not likely to finish it, so let's be judicious with our time, but maybe target what does everyone feel as far as when's appropriate to wrap up?
Order denied.
I like the way that you think on it. I mean, we could see what we could do until 9, maybe give it 20 minutes.
9 o'clock.
Is that
Great with me.
see what you can do until 9? All right.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Okay. Question is, I think is there a particular section that you want to jump into? If you had a chance to look through what I sent over yesterday morning, is there anything specific that you want to dive into?
2 or 3 questions I had.
Yeah.
That would help me understand it better. For example, roadway is not part of the personal people's lots, correct?
Correct, the right away.
And neither's the park strip.
Correct.
And the alley is not part of either the back alley with the garages. That's not part of their lot either, is it?
Correct.
Okay, so the property line stops short of that. Okay.
Correct.
As far as our current road standard, I don't know if they need to be looked at as far as road widths and alley widths before we finalize this, because that could make a big difference to a development like this if we have our current 60 and 50-foot roadways. I don't know if you visualize something different than that or not. Again,
Yeah.
a question in general.
So actually today I had a lot of discussion with Matt Jones on this and what you'll see in the next updated version will include for sure a proposed cross-section of an alleyway, because we can add that to here and then that way there doesn't have to be a separate engineering standards update.
Okay.
And maybe a new street addition as well. We're still looking at that. For the alley, what we're looking at is a one-way 16-foot alley. That's enough for one way, and then actually a 6-foot setback. I have 4 feet in here in that go down to the table, but we're actually looking at changing that to a 4, and that allows for backing up. So right here, minimum rear setback for alley loaded garages. So we're looking at bumping that to 6, and that's tight enough that it saves as much space as possible, but then allows a car pulling back, just makes 2 points and they're going out. So, and it is similar to what's been done in a lot of developments. So answer that question is the next version will have a cross section with an alley and maybe a new street if there is a new street. If not, we'll just use the streets cross sections that we already have.
Similar question, the utility right of ways, does it need to be part of that discussion as well and change its location or its width?
That'll be as the city currently does it. So that won't be any different. The utilities will go in the streets and in the park strips,
Okay.
but not in the alleys.
Okay, right. Okay, those are just a couple pieces that weren't here yet. I just want to bring those up. And I'd like if we could go through this, so I just clarify for me what these mean as I go through and think about it. For example, building type, I understand that one.
Okay, so we have the 4 building types.
Minimum lot size, I think I understand what that is.
And the biggest difference between the small and the medium single family
Thank you.
is that the medium can be front loaded garage.
Right.
Where a small one is a rear loaded only.
Right.
Um,
That makes me good sense.
lot width, you know what that is? How wide can the lot be?
On this townhomes, twin home, is that per building or per household unit?
Per dwelling.
Per dwelling, okay, that's what I thought, just want to clarify that, okay.
Yep. So lot width and then lot depth. How deep is the lot? The front setback.
Where's
Um,
the depth?
I think he added it. It's on the, this is his red line one. Wasn't on this when you were putting it off. Right?
Yeah, all the red are your revisions, correct?
yes, yeah. Anything that's new from when we met in December.
Yeah, did that one there.
Okay. All
And
right, I knew
then-
that, okay.
Front setback is from the porch to the sidewalk.
Property line, yeah. okay.
So think about this, even though this may seem like a really tiny setback, there's
Okay,
we require a porch in this type of development. So you have the home and then you have the porch, and on the porch there'll be fencing or like railing, and then there'll be plantings. Cause you won't be doing just grass. for this type of
you
development plan.
visualizing the porch in front of the house, or the porch is set back and it's part of the house?
It's in front of the house. And but it's part of the house. You need a visual on that?
Could it be either way?
So my porch is kicked back in, what's Ray saying
Part of your house,
is
yeah.
inside the line of the house.
And that's okay too. Either way is fine. That'll be up to the architect. But what I'm getting at is that there's buffering layers of privacy. So there's a porch, there's railing, and then there's plants, and then a sidewalk. So it's not like you open the door and it just feels wide open.
I'm okay with your numbers. I'm okay with changing. I just want to understand what it's saying.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the 7.
There's design behind this, is what I'm explaining.
Okay.
So that's the front setback. The minimum rear setback, as I mentioned, this is gonna change to 6 feet after working that through with engineering.
So the 4, those are the 6.
Yep, those will be 6.
Question
Jake,
on
I
that.
got a question on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, question.
80% of the vehicles in Morgan is 4-wheel drive pickups,
Yeah.
extended cab.
They may not.
They're
be
gonna
one-
make that burn around there?
it's gonna be a 3-point turn.
Oh, okay.
for the-
All right.
Okay, but
And that was accounted for. So this parking stalls, a lot of times development would just require 2 stalls per unit. But we know that if people have garages, they often have a 4-wheeler or bikes or a toy or something like that. So your garage starts to fill up with toys or kid stuff. And so that's where requiring this 3rd per building comes in. And this is allowing for some flexibility that you could have a driveway with 2 stalls, and then your garage with 2, so it could be 4. Or it could be a garage, a single car garage, and then 2 units somewhere else. This is basically saying to the developer, you figure out how you want to do it. We just want to see 3 stalls per unit. And what I have heard is that units that just have the alley and then the garage, but then no additional parking can become a problem because people's garages become storage.
I was gonna tell you, my son lives in East Layton in a townhome, and part of the ordinance or whatever is your garage cannot be filled full of your stuff. It's gotta be able to have cars parked in it or they fine you. So I don't
So they're
know.
looking in the garage, but that's the HOA doing that,
Yeah.
right? The city's not looking in there.
Yeah,
That's HOA.
but it becomes a problem parking on the street and stuff like that.
And-
Hey, Jake, this is Tony. I have a question for you. Is a 7-foot minimum front setback? We're gonna have cars parking on the sidewalk, or is that gonna give them enough room to stay off the sidewalk?
So if the garage is,
There's no garages in front, no driveway.
yeah, so I'm gonna add one thing to this that will fix what you're talking about. And that's if the garage is a front loaded garage,
Right?
then that'll be set back far enough so that cars won't be parking on it.
So it won't be that 7-foot setback if it's front-loaded garage.
Well, okay, there's two ways to do that, and you'll see that, so this is right here. See, they're gonna have to submit a site plan of where things go. So some of the ways they do that. So in this case, this front loaded, it'd be back far enough so they wouldn't be parking on the sidewalk. And then, another case is coming in and turning. So the answer to your question is yes, that's not gonna be a problem. But I'm fine with adding in the ordinance that parking on the sidewalk is not allowed. I think it's a easy one-liner to put in there, and I have neighbors that do it and it bothers me, because that's where kids ride their bikes and people walk and they're just not paying attention half the time. But I think we're good on the ordinance there. I can tweak a couple things to do that, and then we can add a one-liner about no parking on the sidewalk. And it may already be in the city ordinance somewhere else, I don't know.
I think it is.
You think it is, but adding it twice is not a bad thing in this case.
On that minimum rear setback, probably garages, what about a front loading garage? What's the minimum setback for the house?
Well, so the thing is, there's a couple different ways to do that. It does need to be set back far. You see this example right here on the screen?
I mean, the back setback. I don't see a back setback.
Oh, the back setback.
If the garage is not in the, by the alley, if you don't have an alley, what's the back rear
Okay.
setback?
Yeah. I'll add that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
didn't see that
we'll-
rear
we'll-
setback.
I'll make a note right here to add rear setback for no alley.
No, non-alley, rear
Yep.
setback, okay?
Okay.
Minimum minimum side setback,
So that's the side yard. That's where you're not on the corner, but you're next to a house.
do you need any setbacks for the twin home and the
Well,
townhome between buildings?
yeah, so we'll add that one too. The side yard when it's not attached.
Right.
So attached, of course, is 0.
Between townhomes and between twin homes,
Yeah,
maybe something there,
we just need one more line there.
to 0. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay,
And then minimum side setback on the corner, a little bit more room there on the
get that one,
corner.
understand that one.
Building height, I have at 27. That's essentially 2 stories and a roof. It could bump it up a little bit if you wanted to do like 2.5, so the third is more of a bonus room. I don't know if you have any opinions on that. This is going to be a more compact development. What's the residential height now?
Currently, there's no residential height.
Oh,
The
it's
only
just
thing we have.
your ladder truck.
So residential height, there isn't anything. It's only on accessory buildings, and then there's a height up for commercial maximum, and that's it. My opinion, though, is when you have compact developments, I've seen some in out of the Port in the Mountain. And they get, 2 stories. Some of them are even 3 stories or have a huge bonus room above, and then it almost ends up, I don't like it as much. I think 2 stories was good, but 27 feet to me is great.
Opinion, 2.5, you know, that way if they do a basement and you pop that main level up a little bit, you could go up to 30, and that allows for 2.5. Keep it as is. Sometimes, you know, you put together a new ordinance, you adopt it, and then the first couple of projects, you tweak the ordinance as the plans come through, and you let the designers find a few things. You know, it's kind of like Microsoft, right? You think how many times they've put out Windows and then you found all the bugs and they had to update it. Okay. One thing
While you're right there, one just on B,
on B,
underneath your landscapes,
yeah,
on B.
explain this part.
No, I was gonna, well, sorry, above that number 3.
This
Excuse
turf
me.
grass.
Yeah, no, sorry. Lawn areas. Go down to BI.
Yeah,
Well, at least lawn areas should be at least 8 feet wide. That means you can't have any lawn. If your front's only 7-foot setback, your sides are only 5 foot, it means you can't have any lawn at all if you have a minimum of 8 feet.
well, it'd be yeah, well, not in your front yard, but
Or
your
your side yard or
backyard.
your backyard.
No, you can have it in the backyard.
If you've only got a 6-foot setback, your garage to the alleyway,
Well, there's side yards too.
side yard's only 5 feet.
You're thinking minimum setbacks don't mean that's how big it actually
If
is.
somebody did a minimum, they would have no grass.
And that's okay,
It's gotta be 7 feet wide.
but take
You can leave, I'm just commenting.
well, but they can go wider in certain areas. And that 8-foot distance is actually very specific because that's kind of where grass starts to get a little bit efficient. Sprinklers don't even spray less than 8 feet. I mean, how many times have you seen park strip sprinklers that are watering the sidewalk and the street and it's not
I
growing?
understand the reason why it makes sense, but I'm just saying, people won't have any grass.
Well, they could do synthetic or they can do, I mean, I wouldn't reduce that less than 7. The purpose is to get rid of like wasted grass space, to not do grass in wasted space. If that makes sense, that there's areas where you do patios or something else, but you could always take a look at this example right here on the screen. I mean, that's a way that you could do a home, that you would have a little backyard there. Or if you do the front loaded, like we have in this example, you know, front loaded garages, these people will have probably little backyards. And part of this development requires the pocket park, the development. And so they're gonna get a play area. It's just a shared play area. This isn't to replace our typical 10,000 square foot lot. This is to provide housing variety, smaller unit sizes.
Comfortable with that. The thought that I had just turf-wise again, and I realize it's maybe not where you're going out to play, and so by your principle you outlined earlier, then why put grass there? But Roman numeral 2, B2, not allowing turf grass in the parking strip. I don't know how I feel about that from the standpoint of typically what you end up with there is weeds. It starts out as rocks or something for the first year, or bark. And then for the next 10 years, it's weeds, and the snow blower takes the rock parking strip and throws it through a window. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of not allowing grass and the water component of that's so minimal.
Hey, Jake, do you have any samples of the granite?
Yeah.
Can I add one other thing on that too? Okay, so this is just something that I don't like when I look down the street on really a lot of the streets. There's no uniformity on anything that's continuous, like State Street does not have a similar unifying design. I know that's pretty obvious. But when you go to neighborhoods, they're having a unified, like, hey, it is going to be, it's either all grass and everyone has it. It's all whatever this, if we have that control to make it look that way, because otherwise it just turns into this patchwork quilt of, yes, it's rock here, it's turf, artificial turf there, it's whatever there. And it gets really unappealing in my opinion. So that's just my feeling on it. So if we're going to do something like this, I would almost say, let's make it uniform down a street.
So maybe within the project, it needs to be consistent, whatever the parking strip.
I think so, but
Yeah, and the park strip is, it is it's one of like the low hanging fruit. A lot of discussions at this across the whole state among water conservancy groups, the state, cities, all of that. Like the park strip is the first place that's getting the axe. And there's a lot of really good examples out there. And in this case, I don't think you should be as worried. Like it does turn to weeds in some cases, and if people aren't paying attention, yes, that happens. But it is going to be a HOA, and all like, and a park strip is going to be a common area. And so it will be required. So I'm going to show you this
I
example.
get the HOA component of it, and hopefully that can help, but I mean, the reality in these is that over time, they do not deliver on the promise. And I realize we're an apolitical body. I don't want to open the can of worms, but the water conservation component of this is lip service and not actually delivering anything that makes a difference.
No, I would respectfully argue otherwise. This project right here with these top two on the right and lower two on the left, entire development in Salt Lake City. All the park strips are water wise. I saw it 3 years after completion. People are staying on top of it. The thing that helps is these are going to be smaller lots.
Right.
And that really helps. I mean, if you were to do this on a half-acre lot, which I've seen it done well once in Eden, and if it's over by Pine View Reservoir, if you've gone on that pathway that goes around the reservoir, it's like a 1 acre lot. It's all water wise. Other than that, it's the smaller it gets better. This really does make a big difference. And about 60% of our municipal water use is landscape.
Yeah.
And so that's where getting rid of these little weird
Well, I get
spaces
that part.
that
I
are
guess
grass.
what I'm saying is, 70% of our total water use is agriculture. Another 20% of that is commercial and industrial. Only 10% of it's residential. And we're talking about an infinitesimal part of that residential.
We're talking about more than half.
But I'm talking about the entirety, not just.
Sure,
a
sure.
subsection.
But this is something that the city can do.
I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I'm just saying it's not gonna yield the benefits that are anticipated.
It's not gonna preserve all the water in the world, that's true. You could always, we could always just allow grass.
Let's be clear, let's be smart about our water, absolutely. And I'm not opposed to doing any of these things, but I think we're fooling ourselves. So we think that solves the fact that we live in a desert.
Well, this requires people to landscape like they live in a desert. And it doesn't have to look like this. There's some great examples in Park City that I can send you that are really,
Because the other component of that is, you know, I have a neighbor that has a xeriscaped, you know, property. And they water their rocks just as much as I water my grass.
they're doing sprays.
Yeah, the rocks haven't grown. Actually, it might be. They seem to encroach on my yard.
Right. But I see in these things, what we're talking about is like those subdivisions, large ones there, you're buying your individual lots. When you're talking about an overlay mixed housing, you're now taking this and having an HOA and you're, you know, Justin is saying, well, how do we get consistency? Well, that's when you've got these guidelines here and you're the one that's going to be approving the project, you know, and so you're the one that's saying, hey, you know, this is what's going to be allowed in this common area, which are the park strips. And these are the options. And so hopefully you can get a product that will not just be plain rocks.
So we're over time and I didn't mean to open the can of worms, other than all I was trying to point out is I'm not super comfortable just completely banning turf in the park strip.
You do a maximum of 50%. One thing that if you are gonna do turf, it needs to be 7 feet wide. Like you just can't spray anything less than 7 feet. And be able to, at that point, you're watering the sidewalk and watering the street.
You need to buy some different heads for your sprinklers. They make them and only go about 2 feet.
They're not that efficient.
So that's the only thought, and we
Okay.
can revisit that, and it's not a deal breaker.
Of course.
Right? It's just a thought that as long as we're talking about it, I like the look of that green in front of a property. I don't think we lose a lot water-wise there. I
Yeah.
really disagree.
Uniformity for me.
One thing
That's what it is.
When you
Look,
take
make
a
it
look
look
at the
nice.
email, last thing to look at, go to the last part, I added this. This is what you're gonna be looking at as a planning commission when it comes in. So site plans with building envelopes, streets, alleys, parking, stormwater, open space amenities, trails, utility corridors. The usable open space, that's a new term we've added to this, you know, having place that you can play and use. A street tree plan, so that's where you'll get that consistency looking down the street. So the whole development says, okay, sycamore maples here, or London Plain there, and all of that. Conceptual building elevations, so you'll see that, so that way the developer has to start thinking about that. HOA, CCNRs, property and landscape management plans, so thinking about the maintenance and all of that. And then what comes at the building permit level, that way planning commission doesn't have to look at everything, is building elevations with materials, like are they meeting all our requirements, landscape plans. And then you'll notice we don't do backyards, just front yards, townhome areas, common areas. And then open space plan, construction documents and civil construction documents. This way you use the planning commission and the city council approve the big picture and the design and all of that. But you don't have to go through and say, okay, these 3 homes are actually different. That'll happen at the staff level, but still get done.
Jake, thank you. We did go a little bit past 9 o'clock.
Sorry.
That was probably my fault, so you don't need to apologize. But let's wrap up here. And at this point, I'd like to adjourn the meeting.
That's the best idea.